Before the satisfying clink of a coin in your palm, how did people trade? Here in Britain, long before the Romans set foot on our shores, life was a complex dance of exchange. It was a world without wallets, a time before pockets jingled with silver. Instead, value was measured in things you could touch, use, and see. Imagine a bustling Iron Age settlement, smoke curling from thatched roofs. A farmer with a surplus of grain might trade it with a neighbor for a well-crafted pot. A skilled hunter could exchange a fine deerskin for a set of sharp flint tools. This was the barter system, a direct and honest way of doing business that connected people in a very real way. This wasn't just simple swapping of goods. It was a sophisticated system built on trust, reputation, and an agreed understanding of worth. Certain items became so widely accepted they acted almost like money. Salt, for instance, was incredibly valuable. It was essential for preserving food through the long, dark winters. Its name even gives us the word salary. Likewise, cattle were a measure of great wealth. You could count a chieftain's power by the size of his herd. These weren't just animals, they were walking, breathing assets. It was a tangible economy, where your wealth was what you could farm, what you could make, and what you could hunt. But barter has its limits, doesn't it? What if the potter doesn't need any more grain? What if your deerskin is worth more than the tools on offer, but less than 2 sets? It can get complicated. This is where things called proto-money come into the picture. Archaeologists have unearthed curious objects from this period, like iron currency bars. These were long, flat bars of iron, sometimes shaped like swords or spits. They weren't practical tools, but they had a standard size and weight. They were an early attempt to create a common unit of value, a step away from swapping a pig for a pot, and a step towards the idea of a coin. These currency bars tell a fascinating story. They show a society becoming more complex, trading over longer distances. It's the story of people needing a more convenient, more universal way to store and exchange wealth. You can see the human mind grappling with a problem, searching for a solution. It was out of this need, this search for something small, durable, and universally valued, that the idea of the coin would eventually be born. The stage was set. Across the choppy waters of the Channel, new ideas were travelling. Ideas that would soon arrive on these shores and change the face of Britain forever. The age of silver was about to dawn. Around 100 BCE, a radical new idea washed up on Britain's southern shores. It came with traders and tribes from Gaul, modern-day France. It was the coin. For the first time, people in Britain began to see and use these small stamped pieces of metal. The very first coins were actually made of gold, copied from the grand staters of Philip II of Macedon. But soon after, something just as revolutionary appeared. The first silver coins minted right here in Britain. These weren't crude copies. They were a uniquely British invention, crafted by the powerful Celtic tribes of the southeast, like the Atrebates and the Canti. These early silver coins are known to us as units and minims. They were tiny, often no bigger than your little fingernail, but their size hides their huge importance. Creating a coin isn't simple. You need to mine the silver, refine it, and have the skill to create dies, the stamps used to press a design into the metal. This tells us that these Celtic tribes were incredibly sophisticated. They had organized societies, skilled artisans, and powerful leaders who wanted to put their mark, quite literally, on the world. These weren't just pieces of money, they were symbols of power and identity. The designs on these coins are just mesmerizing. They are abstract, almost dreamlike. You won't find realistic portraits like on a Roman coin. Instead, you see swirling patterns, disjointed parts of animals, and most famously, the Celtic horse. This wasn't just decoration. These symbols were packed with meaning for the people who used them. representing gods, tribal identities, or myths whose stories are now lost to the mists of time. Holding one of these tiny silver discs is like holding a secret. It's a fragment of a belief system, a piece of a worldview that is utterly different from our own, a whisper from a forgotten Britain. The arrival of these silver coins marked a profound shift. They made trade easier and more efficient than the old barter system. They allowed chieftains to pay warriors and to display their wealth and authority in a brand new way. A leader who could mint his own coins was a leader to be reckoned with. This wasn't just an economic revolution, it was a political one. It shows Britain was not an isolated island on the edge of the world. It was connected, dynamic, and adopting new technologies. The clink of these first silver coins was the sound of a new chapter beginning in our island's story. In the year 43 CE, the Roman legions landed. And they didn't just bring swords and shields, they brought their coins. Suddenly, the abstract, swirling designs of the Celtic coins were joined by something very different: the Roman silver denarius. This was the dollar of the ancient world, a coin recognized across a vast empire, from the deserts of Syria to the misty hills of Caledonia. For the people of Britain, it must have been a startling sight. Here was a coin with a photorealistic portrait of a man, the emperor, on one side, and clear Latin writing. It was a piece of propaganda you could hold in your hand. The arrival of the denarius and other Roman coins completely changed Britain's economy. The Romans built towns, forts, and a remarkable network of roads. This new infrastructure was lubricated by their money. Soldiers needed to be paid. Administrators needed to buy supplies. Merchants travelled the new roads, selling everything from Italian wine to local pottery, and all of it was paid for with Roman coins. The Celtic mints in the southeast fell silent. Why mint your own tribal coin when the money of the world's greatest superpower was now the only currency that mattered? The denarius was king. For nearly 400 years, Roman silver was the lifeblood of Britannia. It paid for the construction of Hadrian's Wall. It was offered to the gods at the sacred springs in Bath. It was buried in hoards for safekeeping, little pots of treasure that farmers still unearth today, giving us a direct physical link to that long-lost world. Looking at a Roman denarius found in a British field, you can't help but wonder about its journey. Who held it? What did they buy with it? Was it a soldier's wages, a merchant's profit, or a farmer's life savings? Each coin has a hidden story to tell. But then, as the 5th century began, the empire began to crumble. The legions were recalled from Britain to defend other frontiers. The supply of new coins from the continental mints dried up. It was a catastrophic economic shock. Without new money, the whole system seized up. People resorted back to barter. The grand stone villas were abandoned, the towns emptied. It was as if the lights had been turned off. The Roman silver coins, once a symbol of order and prosperity, were now just relics of a golden age that had vanished, buried in the ground and waiting for a new chapter to begin. After the Romans left, Britain entered a period we often call the Dark Ages. But when it comes to coins, the darkness was soon pierced by little glints of silver. Around the year 600, coinage returned. The Anglo-Saxons, the new power in the land, began to mint their own coins. At first, they were small gold pieces, but very quickly silver took over once more. These new coins were called sciatas. It's a wonderful Old English word meaning wealth or treasure. And that's exactly what they were, tiny, thick silver discs brimming with a strange and beautiful new art. The designs on the scatters are a fantastic mix of influences. You can see echoes of the Roman coins they sometimes copied, but twisted into new forms. You see strange, beast-like creatures, birds, and human faces that stare out at you across 13 centuries. There are even some nicknamed porcupines for their spiky designs. This wasn't one kingdom with one currency. Dozens of different kings and bishops across the different Anglo-Saxon kingdoms, Northumbria, Mercia, Kent, minted their own ciatas. It was a vibrant, diverse, and sometimes chaotic monetary world, a perfect reflection of the times. Then, towards the end of the 8th century, something changed. A new, thinner, broader coin appeared. It was introduced by the powerful Mercian king, Offa, and it was called the penny. This was a revolution. The penny would become the backbone of English currency for the next 500 years. It was a coin of remarkable quality, with a consistent weight and a high silver content. On one side, you often had the king's name and portrait, a clear statement of royal authority. This wasn't just money, it was a tool for unifying a kingdom. The silver penny saw England through some of its most turbulent times. It survived the Viking invasions. In fact, the Vikings loved the English penny so much they copied it, and the vast sums of Danegeld, protection money paid to the Vikings to stop them from raiding, were paid in millions of these silver coins. Great kings like Alfred the Great and Athelstan used the penny to consolidate their power, controlling who could mint them and where. The Anglo-Saxon silver penny wasn't just a coin, it was a testament to resilience, a symbol of emerging English identity, and a piece of silver that connected kings, monks, merchants, and Vikings. The year 1066, a date every schoolchild knows. The Battle of Hastings didn't just change the language and the aristocracy of England. It had a profound impact on the silver coins in people's pockets. When William the Conqueror seized the throne, he took control of a highly organized and efficient minting system, a legacy of the later Anglo-Saxon kings. He didn't need to reinvent the wheel. The silver penny was already a superb coin, so he kept it. But he made one crucial change. He put his own face on it, making it clear to everyone that a new master was in charge. The Normans were systematic, they were organized, and they applied this to the coinage. Under the Norman kings, the designs of the silver penny were changed regularly, every few years. This was a clever move. It forced people to bring their old coins to the mints to be exchanged for new ones. Each time they did this, the crown took a small fee for the service, making it a very effective form of taxation. It also meant that the king could ensure the quality of the coinage, removing worn or clipped coins from circulation and maintaining trust in the currency. It was a system of control, exercised through silver. One of the biggest problems for medieval money was clipping. Because the coins were made of precious silver, people would snip tiny bits off the edges. Over time, a clipped coin would be worth much less than its face value. To combat this, King Henry II introduced a new design in 1180 called the short cross penny. It had a cross that only went part of the way to the coin's edge. Later, in 1247, his grandson Henry III brought in the long cross penny, with a cross that stretched right to the rim. This made it immediately obvious if a coin had been clipped. It was a simple but brilliant piece of security design. This period also saw the introduction of new denominations, though they were slow to catch on. For centuries, if you needed to pay for something that cost less than a penny, you literally had to cut the coin into halves or quarters, giving us the terms halfpenny and farthing, a farthing. It wasn't until the late 13th century that round halfpennies and farthings were regularly minted. The silver penny, in its various cross designs, remained the workhorse of the English economy for centuries, a constant silver thread running through the heart of the Middle Ages, witnessing the signing of Magna Carta and the building of our great cathedrals. The arrival of the Tudor dynasty in 1485 heralded a new age for Britain and for its silver coinage. the medieval world was giving way to the Renaissance, and the coins really reflected this change. Henry VII introduced a stunning new silver coin called the testoon, which we now know as the shilling. It was revolutionary because it featured a realistic, lifelike portrait of the king, a world away from the stylized faces of the medieval pennies. This was, in a sense, humanism in metal form. For the first time, ordinary people could see what their monarch truly looked like, a powerful piece of royal branding. The Tudors also brought in the first silver crown, a large, magnificent coin worth 5 shillings. But this era is perhaps most famous for the Great Debasement under Henry VIII. Desperate for money to fund his wars and, well, his lavish lifestyle, Henry and his son Edward VI began to reduce the amount of silver in the coins, replacing it with cheap copper. The coins looked pale and sickly. As they wore down in circulation, the copper would show through on the high points, especially the king's nose. This earned Henry the unflattering nickname, Old Copper Nose. It was a financial disaster that destroyed public trust in the currency. It fell to Henry's formidable daughter, Elizabeth I, to clean up the mess. In 1560, she launched a major reform of the coinage, recalling all the debased money and issuing new coins of fine, high-quality silver. It was a huge undertaking, but it worked. It restored faith in English money at home and abroad. The coins of Elizabeth I are works of art, featuring her famous profile and intricate designs. The portcullis money she issued for the East India Company was the first British currency made for overseas trade, marking the beginning of a global commercial empire, all built on the gleam of good silver. The Stuart period that followed saw further innovation. For centuries, coins had been made by hand, struck with a hammer. This meant they were often irregular in shape and easy to clip or counterfeit. But under Charles II, new machinery was introduced from France. Milled coinage was born. These new coins were perfectly round, with lettering or patterns on the edge, making clipping impossible. This was a huge technological leap forward. The silver crown, half-crown, shilling, and sixpence of the late Stuart period were handsome modern coins, symbols of a nation recovering from civil war and looking towards a new era of science and commerce. The 18th and early 19th centuries were a time of incredible change. The Industrial Revolution was taking hold, and Britain was transforming from a rural, agricultural nation into an industrial powerhouse. But our coinage was in a terrible state. The government had focused on minting gold, and there was a desperate shortage of official silver and copper coins for everyday transactions. People were being paid their wages, and they had no small change to buy bread or beer. The silver coins that did circulate were often worn smooth, their designs completely erased by time and use, many of them dating back 100 years. Into this vacuum stepped private enterprise. Factory owners, town corporations, and merchants took matters into their own hands. They began to mint their own tokens. These were unofficial coins, usually made of copper but sometimes silver, that were accepted locally. A factory owner might pay his workers in tokens that could only be spent at his own shop. While this solved the immediate problem of small change, it was chaotic. The value of these tokens could fluctuate wildly, and it was a sign that the official currency system was broken and failing the needs of a modern, industrialized society. The tipping point came after the Napoleonic Wars. Britain had won the war, but its currency was in chaos. In 1816, the government acted. It launched a massive program known as the Great Recoinage. It was a complete overhaul of the nation's money. The old, worn-out silver was recalled, and a huge quantity of brand-new silver coins was issued. A new gold coin, the sovereign, was introduced, and Britain officially adopted the gold standard. Silver was now token coinage, meaning its value was guaranteed by the state, rather than by the intrinsic worth of the metal it contained. The coins of the 1816 coinage were magnificent. They were the product of the new steam-powered presses at the Royal Mint. They were uniform, well-struck, and beautiful. The silver crown, half-crown shilling, and sixpence of this era are classics of British numismatics. The highlight was the new silver crown, which featured a spectacular design by the Italian engraver Benedetto Castrucci. St. George slaying the dragon. This powerful, dynamic image is still used on our coins today. The Great Recoinage was a statement of national pride and industrial might, a silver foundation for the Victorian age and the height of the British Empire. For a century after the Great Recoinage, silver remained a familiar part of everyday life. Every Briton, from a duke to a docker, would have had silver shillings and sixpences in their pockets. These Victorian and Edwardian coins were symbols of stability, of an empire on which the sun never set. They were made of 92.5% silver, a standard known as sterling silver that had been in place for centuries. They felt solid, dependable. They were real money, with a real intrinsic value. But the immense pressures of the 20th century would bring this long silver age to a dramatic close. The first blow came with the First World War. The cost of fighting the war was astronomical. The government needed every ounce of precious metal it could get its hands on. People were encouraged to turn in their gold sovereigns. But silver coinage was also under strain. By 1920, the price of silver on the world market had risen so much that the metal in the coins was worth more than their face value. To prevent people from melting them down, the government made a drastic decision. The silver content of Britain's coins was slashed from the sterling standard of 92.5% down to just 50%. The new 50% silver coins served Britain through the Depression and the Second World War. But another global conflict brought about the final end. The Second World War left Britain victorious but bankrupt. The country owed vast sums of money to its allies, particularly the United States. Part of the war debt was to be repaid in silver bullion. To get this silver, the government made a final, decisive move. In 1947, silver was removed from all circulating coinage in the United Kingdom. It was completely replaced by a new alloy of copper and nickel, known as cupro-nickel. For the first time in over 1,000 years, the clink of silver coins was no longer heard in the shops and pubs of Britain. The new cupro-nickel coins looked similar, but they felt different. They lacked the weight, the luster, and the history of their silver predecessors. It was the end of an era. The change was a practical necessity, a reflection of a new post-war economic reality. The precious metal that had defined British money since the days of the Anglo-Saxons was now too valuable to be used for everyday transactions. The long story of circulating silver in Britain had come to an end. Just because silver disappeared from our pockets didn't mean it vanished completely. In fact, its story was about to take an exciting new turn. Once silver coins were no longer needed for everyday commerce, people began to see them in a new light. They weren't just old money anymore. They were artifacts. They were tangible links to the past. The shilling your grandfather received in his pay packet, the Tudor crown that survived the Reformation, the Roman denarius lost by a legionary. All of them became collector's items, treasured for their history, their artistry, and their rarity. The Royal Mint, which had stopped making circulating silver in 1947, realized there was a new market for these beautiful coins. It began to strike special commemorative coins specifically for the collector market. These are often made of sterling or even pure silver. They celebrate royal weddings, jubilees, historical anniversaries, and national heroes. These modern coins are not intended to be spent in shops. They are miniature works of art, crafted to the very highest standards, often presented in beautiful boxes with certificates of authenticity. They are a way for people to own a piece of that precious metal that has such a deep connection to our national story. This collector's market has given silver coins a whole new life. There are now thriving communities of numismatists, coin collectors, who study, trade, and cherish these metal discs. They hunt for rare dates, for coins with unusual errors, or for pieces in perfect, pristine condition. An old coin is no longer just valued for the silver it contains. Its value now comes from its story, its provenance, and its connection to the great events and people of the past. Holding a heavy silver crown from the reign of Queen Victoria is to hold a piece of the 19th century in the palm of your hand. From the first tiny, abstract units of the Celtic tribes to the magnificent proof coins of today, the story of Britain's silver coinage is a mirror to our own history. It reflects our politics, our art, our technology, and our economy. It tells of the rise and fall of empires, of the power of kings, and of the everyday lives of ordinary people. Silver may no longer jingle in our purses, but its legacy is all around us. It lives on in our language, in the museums, and in the hands of collectors who ensure that the gleam of British silver will never truly